Hello and welcome to Performance Check. My name is Rob, and my goodness me, do I have a treat for all of you watching today. I am joined by a fistful of dice and co-creator of Absolute Tabletop, Matt Click. And today we're going to be talking about classes and custom player options for you to create yourself for your own games. Say hey, man.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Thank you for having me on, Rob.
Dude, it is such a pleasure, and I'll briefly explain why this has come about before we begin. So, the other day, I messaged Matt because I've been doing a lot of thinking about my own campaign, the Lorekeepers. And for those who don't know, the Lorekeepers in this campaign setting are a faction. They're an ancient faction that have since gone by the wayside and are no longer as prevalent as they were. But some of them do still exist. And I find it tricky when you bring in factions within your games, personally, because I wonder, should they have their own, class abilities, or should it just be an effort of reskinning, And I thought, who better to ask than the fellow who does it professionally, who makes money from this sort of stuff, man. So, I basically am doing this in a loose kind of way to work out what I'm going to be doing with the Lorekeepers. But I thought, why keep this information to myself? Why be selfish? Why not do a live stream so everyone can benefit from the wisdom of a click? So, so dude, I've already got like a few questions, but I thought we could chat, and I'm going to bring up the chat from the stream, so people watching can also ask questions if they want to start making their own classes as well.
Cool. So, yeah, sounds good.
To begin with, I think this is kind of a fitting question, dude. Where do we start? Where do we begin when we want to make a class for? We're going to be talking about 5th edition, I reckon, mainly.
Yeah, definitely. That's where I didn't do much homebrewing with 3rd edition. I was still pretty young and still fairly inexperienced in my days there, so it wasn't something that I enjoyed tinkering with very much. There were a few things here and there. There was a lot of reskinning that happened with 3rd edition. I had one character that was I multi-classed the crap out of him. I think by level 20 he was a fighter wizard monk who I flavored as a sort of artificer who had all these different devices and things like that, but I didn't really start tinkering with mechanics and creating things until 5th edition came around. And 5th edition is so nice to work with. It's like the most malleable clay that's just like effortless to sculpt. I really, really enjoy working with 5th edition.
Well, I love that you mentioned that, because you and I feel come from sort of the same upbringing of like the 3rd edition 3.5.
Yes.
So
we are the same, you and I, Rob.
We understand the myriad of information that came along with 3rd edition. Like it was endless. And it was endless tide of information just thrust at you. And you can multi-class in. It was all about the multi-classing, really, wasn't it?
Oh man, multi-classing, skill dumping, like just all kinds of crazy stuff you could do to create the character that you wanted to.
Skill synergies and all sorts.
Yeah. And different feats that would sort of trigger each other and create these crazy infinite damage situations and things. And to a certain extent, that's what happens when you get bloat in your system, where there's so many things that aren't intended to work together but are part of the same system, that somehow you find these crazy ways where they work together. But 5th edition thus far has sort of avoided that, because they're focusing less on classes and more on different options for the existing classes that they have, which I appreciate. I prefer that personally, but your question of where do we start, I think the first question that you have to ask yourself if you're looking at creating custom content, whether it be a class or a background or a race or anything like that, is you have to ask yourself, what function will this serve? And is that function already covered by something that already exists? So if you're wanting to create a class, think to yourself, what do I want this class to do? And maybe even write it down, choose 3 or 4 bullet points of what you want the class to be able to do. And then look at the existing classes and their archetypes and see if something like that already exists, because it might be something where you can either reskin or even just tinker something just a little bit make it work with what you're wanting. But I think for the purposes of our discussion today, we're probably going to talk about like, okay, you've gotten past that point, nothing like that exists, now what?
Definitely. And I suppose then I will find that back to you in terms of the content that you've already created, because obviously people watching, they know who you are. Everyone who's on my channel knows who you are, trust me. And they are probably going to be infinitely familiar with classes like the Convokers, for example. I think it's the one that leaps straight into my mind. So when you sat down and thought, I wanna create, you know, your own thing, like what did you what was going through your mind when you were putting that onto paper, for example?
Man, there were a lot of iterations of Convoker stuff. Initially when I was working on it, I made it into a background. I was thinking that it was going to be a background, so then you could be, because I didn't want it to be that you couldn't be a fighter and also be a Convoker, or you couldn't be a rogue and also be a Convoker. And so we were working with it in terms of a background. And so we were thinking, you know, you would get some cool equipment from the background, and, you know, the usual sort of like social feature that all the backgrounds have. But A, that didn't feel powerful or mighty enough. And B, it also, I was sort of realizing, well, I want an urchin to be able to become a Convoker, and I want a criminal to be able to become a Convoker. It's like, I don't want to limit what it takes to be a Convoker. And so eventually we just decided to create our own thing and create what we called a faction class, which we used that system for both the Convokers and the Copper Jackals. And the faction class was basically its own extra thing to add on top of your existing class, race, and background. And we did it in a way where it's not a bunch of extra bookkeeping. It's just some extra powers that you get. And really what it comes down to is you're upping the power of the character by adding additional things to the character. And so it has its pros and cons. I think the biggest con is probably if you're running a party and one of the party is a Convoker and the rest of the party isn't, that Convoker is going to be vastly superior in combat situations. Because they just have so many more options and so many more abilities and things like that. So it's one of those things where we made the decision to be like, well, if people are going to run a Convoker game, we want them to run a game where everyone's a Convoker, or we want them to run a game where everyone's a Copper Jackal. And I think that was sort of the downside to it, I suppose. But ultimately, we're happy with it because now there's so many different ways to build Convokers and build Copper Jackals that aren't dependent on race and class and background.
And I think that's absolutely inspired, because through the early stages of my planning of building a class, like I stumbled into the same thing. I was like, hang on a second, I want to make Lorekeepers, but I don't necessarily want them to stop being their classes. Like I like their classes. Why would I want them to change that? So I think the idea of having the faction classing that slots on top of it is absolutely inspired. So in that case, then, would you say that would be the best way of customizing factions within 5th edition, or do you think building from the ground up with a straight class would have its, I know obviously its own merits for it balancing with just standard characters, I guess, but
yeah, I think so. I think you run into an issue where members of that faction would be getting obviously some extra things. But I think that it serves a cool purpose in that, you know, if you have an organization like the Lorekeepers, they're not all specialized doing the same thing. You know, like you have people that are good at this and good at this. And it's like, if they're all the same class, it's like, it's kind of the same problem that like in 3rd edition, like the Harper Scout Prestige class, it's like, oh, it's really cool. You can be a Harper Scout. But it's a class, so all the Harper Scouts like do the same stuff, like, and they're capable of doing the same thing. And so it sort of took away from the Harper Scout faction the cool factor of it, because it was all of a sudden it was a class and not just a faction that you would join. And so thinking about a faction like the Lorekeepers, I think that you might think about, okay, well, maybe I just add stuff on top of what they already have. Maybe they get some cool abilities, or maybe they get a specific kind of magic item that they all have that has some different things that they can do with it. And just kind of focusing on that. And the main thing being keeping it as simple as possible, because you don't want to make your job harder as a game master, and you don't want to make the player's job harder trying to keep track of all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy with that, because I think yeah, keeping it simple, keeping it slick is the best thing, especially with like fifth. Like fifth is a slick beast. You know, it moves quickly. It's just great. So I wouldn't want to hamper that in any way, because like combat and the encounters and things are the things that, you know, I really love doing, and I like it being slick. So definitely minimizing the effort there as well. So in that case, if you are going to, if I then take this idea of maybe making this into sort of like the faction class rather than its own thing, how do I maintain balance amongst those different abilities they get? Like, how do you make it align with the system? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's tough, man. And it's one of those things where people talk about balance so much, and like, oh, I made this class, is it balanced? I made this race, is it balanced? And if you look, okay, so 5th edition has this awesome thing called bounded accuracy, where it effectively, because the margin for success and failure is so tight, you have less problems where you're running into these high highs and these low lows of a system like 3rd edition, where, you know, depending on how you built a character, the character could be just completely insanely broken in combat, and a character that has the same class, but because they didn't take a certain kind of feat, or because they didn't put points into this attribute, they're hindered. So balance is less of an issue in working with 5th edition. I feel you could argue, you know, that it isn't, but I think that bounded accuracy really, really helps. And also, balance is one of those words that you have to kind of throw out at a certain point, because what does balance mean? Are we talking about balance in combat? Are we talking about balance in utility situations with skills? Are we talking about exploration, social interaction? Like, class features are not just tied to numbers in RPGs, especially not in 5th edition. You have a lot of abilities that are just like, hey, you can move twice as fast through cities, or whenever you need to, you can go find a fence to sell stolen goods or whatever. Like, how do you put a numerical weight to that feature, right? And so the first thing is, forget about balance, at least for now. Like, take the word balance and just like throw it out the window, because as soon as someone joins a faction and gets stuff from that faction, they are immediately more capable in that regard than somebody who's not in that faction. And I think that is okay.
That is I'm glad you said that, really, because that's something that the mindset that I've shared, in the sense that you're telling a story, and you're telling about a story about some people that go and join this mythical order. It's like people becoming Jedi Knights, and then all of a sudden saying, these guys are kicking the shit out of the stormtroopers. Yeah. Why? You know, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so there has to be that kind of, like, if you're accepting you're making this new kind of order that you're telling the story about, then they're generally going to be better than the average grunt. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, actually, because that is a word that has hung over my head in a way that I've not liked for a long time. Yeah. So I'm glad you've freed me of that tyranny, at least. Yeah. So what drew you to that decision then? Like how have you discovered all these? How did you learn to do this, Matt? Like, honestly, is it just practice, or?
It's just practice. It's playing a lot of games, and it's for me, the biggest thing has been having people to talk to about it. You know, whether it be Absolute Tabletop or the other people that I interact with in the community, like bouncing ideas off of them. And because most of the time when you come up with an idea, it's like half of a usable idea. It's like a concept. And in order for it to get to that 3/4, 100% usability, you need to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody and be like, I need a sanity check here. Like, can you tell me if this is terrible or not? And I guess for me, it's a fairly new, like, I'm not an expert on building classes, and I'm working on this thing called Harbinger right now. I'm working on the classes for that. And the classes are so different from when I first like wrote them. Like they're nothing like they are when I first wrote them. And it's because I sort of started building them with these half-formed ideas, and through talking with people and bouncing ideas off of people and also looking at what already exists in 5th edition, it really helps. And so I would say the two biggest things are, talking to people, finding people who are creative, who give you good feedback. You want someone who is not going to just be a yes man, but is also not just going to be looking for issues. You know, if someone goes into a certain something that you're working on looking for what's wrong, they're going to find something wrong because they're going to make it wrong in their head. You want someone who's balanced. You want a balanced person. You know, you want someone who's going to come in there and look at it with fresh eyes and look at it as someone just experiencing it. And it's really tough, man. And I think that the other thing is looking at what's already out there. So many people are like, well, I want to make this new class and I'm going to totally make it from scratch. I'm not going to, it's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen. It's like, look at a supplement like Adventures in Middle Earth. That book has 8 or 9 new classes in it.
Yeah.
But the classes themselves, if you look at them, you're like, hold up, this is a barbarian. Oh, wait a minute, this is a rogue. Yeah. Or like, this is a ranger, but they're just different enough where it's like, well, no, wait, this is different than a ranger. This has definitely got some Middle Earth flavor in there. And so when I was creating classes for Harbinger, that was one of the big things, is like, this stuff already works in 5th edition. So there's no reason why this character can't just have sneak attack. I don't have to come up with a different sneak attack, like Harbinger sneak attack. I'm just like, no, they get sneak attack. It works the same way as it does in regular 5th edition, but they also get some other cool stuff too. So 1, find people that you trust who will tell you what sucks and what doesn't. And 2, look at stuff that's already out there and steal it. Like, just steal it, hamburgle it as much as you can.
That is gold right there. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're writing this down. And you don't need to, just watch the video again. I'm a moron. But it's interesting, and I'm really glad that you brought up Harbinger, because it is kind of the elephant in the room. You are currently creating, I mean, if I'm right in saying you've created 3 classes for it and there are more on the way, or you've already...
Yeah, there's a doc that I have that has a few different like skeletal sort of concepts for the classes. And there's also different archetypes for each of the classes that will, do different functions. But that's another thing that I love about 5th edition is the archetypes and being able to, I always look forward to 3rd level, man. 3rd level, it's like, it goes off. You decide what your character is going to be at 3rd level in 5th edition. But archetypes and classes for Harbinger, it's really starting to sort of coalesce in front of me as to what I want to do with all of them. And archetypes are incredibly useful for that, because it's like, let's say you have a casting class and you're like, well, I want a caster that does this, but I also want a caster that does that. Obviously, you can have like a wizard sorcerer situation, or you can have a casting class that has archetypes that wildly split off at a certain point, so that, by the time you get to the end of the road, completely different characters, like in Harbinger, we have the casting class, the Mancer, and the specialization, the archetype that's in the playtest is, they're called Benders, and they're like very straightforward casters that can just cast really good spells, and they get some cool benefits where they can like take less negative effects from the magic system and stuff. But we're also working on a specialization that's called a Void Priest, where they want to up their negative effects because they enter like a barbarian-like state where if they're at their like limit of how much magic they can cast, they like Hulk out and get super strong and can do other cool stuff.
That's amazing.
Like using archetypes is really, really cool too. So that's another option that I think I mentioned before, but if you're wanting something akin to like a faction class, maybe coming up with a few different archetypes for the different classes. Like, okay, maybe in the Lorekeepers, there's like a bard archetype and a fighter archetype and a blah, blah, you come up with some of those. That's a lot of work, but it lends itself to more flexibility than a single class.
Definitely, and that's what I really liked about the Convocation as well, because that had its own archetypes as well, which I really liked, and it made it very flexible. I suppose what I would like to ask as well is, because obviously we talk about Harbinger as well, where we're taking concepts like you're imagining, okay, I want this particular class to fight people like they're using biotics from Mass Effect, or the warp from 40k, or the force from Star Wars. Like, how do you align those concepts to the mechanics? Is it simply what you said earlier about finding the closest thing to the source material, or have there been occasions where you have literally just plucked something out of the air and it just works, or you've made it work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for something like that, I would normally look at reskinning, or looking at stuff that already exists. You know, if you're wanting to play somebody that uses like telekinesis, like obviously, you know, you can look at something like a psionic class. You know, there's rules out there for playing psionic characters in 5th edition, which is like literally like telekinesis and stuff like that. But there's also like just reskinning is so like useful. Like if you're playing take a warlock and just build him as a warlock, but instead of describing Eldritch Blast as being like a blast of like arcane energy, describe it as like you're using your mind to like combust the air in front of you and like blow this guy up. It's like, it doesn't change the mechanics of it, and it's very rare that you're going to run into a game master that says, well, hang on, that's not how Eldritch Blast works. And you're like, I still rolled the 1d8 damage or whatever it is, dude. Like, effectively, it's how Eldritch Blast works. So definitely reskinning is like my go-to, like all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, in many ways, I feel that is the most creative way to go about it as well, because you are having to come up with obviously different ways of it, existing within the canon of your world and stuff, how it manifests in encounters and things like that. Yeah, no, I love that, man. And to be honest, the more that you're talking to me about this, the more I'm thinking, maybe the faction class thing slot on with a better reskinning might be the simplest solution. For me anyway.
Yeah, it's nice because you don't have to rework an existing class or come up with your own, because so many people think, well, I want to make a cool class. And it's like, you're not just making a class, you're coming up with the concept for a class and cool stuff that they get for 20 levels. Like, it's so much work. And you have to think about scaling those things so that they get more awesome the higher up you get, and you want, but also the hard part is you want them to get a core class feature at like level 1 or 2 that scales with them and gets better as they grow and level and stuff. And so the faction class is nice because it's just more stuff. And especially if you do something like looking at, here's an option that I just thought of. So in 5th edition, every 4th level, you can increase an attribute or gain a feat if you're using feats. It's an optional rule. What if you had a faction class that played upon the feats? So it's like, okay, instead of increasing an attribute, you get a Lorekeeper feat. And what you would do as a game master is you're like, I'm going to write like 12 cool feats that they can choose from. And maybe there are some that have requirements to them that they can get later on, but then they're able to completely build their character. They're getting feats, but also you're not making them that much powerful than a normal 5th edition character. And so you're not having to worry about like, I need to calculate all my CRs differently and like hit them with really hard things. And so that might be an option as well, as like feats. Again, I talked about this before, but Adventures in Middle-earth did it right with virtues and cultural virtues, and having these really cool, flavorful feats that are tied to the cultures. And so it'd be cool to have like Lorekeeper feats that the Lorekeeper characters could choose from.
Dude, that's an insanely good idea, and I might have to take that up on you. I'll owe you like a percentage or something there, right?
No, that's all yours. That's all yours, man. That's a freebie. I'll get you next time.
No, I really, dude, that is inspired. Yeah. And that seems like a really simple way of going about it as well. Because I mean, the thing I like about, and I have a few ideas about what the Lorekeepers are going to be able to do. Don't really want to go into it too much now, but I didn't want to rob, like I was saying earlier, I didn't want to rob the actual vanilla classes of their progression and like overshadowing it with stuff that I'm making up that might not turn out to be great because I don't make games, I don't. So
I mean, I hardly do any too, Rob. So it's all good.
No, dude, and everything that I've seen from you, man, is bloody gold. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Enough of that. So I'm going to quickly jump into the chat to see, because I asked to see if anyone had any questions to put to you regarding creating classes, because I'm sure after this there'll be a bunch of people wanting to create their own factions and classes within their own worlds. So where did I actually say it? This is the question, and I will go from there. Okay, so excellent. Marquis is helping run some field for you, Rob. Thank you very much, Marquis. So let's
He's always
see.
good for that, man.
He is the shepherd of the questions. I'm not seeing many questions. Come on. Sounds about if you see the chat, Matt, and if you see one that you like, look up by all means.
I just opened it up here. I'm scrolling through it right now.
Yeah, man, because I'm just reading on a live stream now, which isn't the most entertaining thing. Okay, so I've got a question here from Nicholas Jacket. I'd love to have an input from you guys on that. What if a player presents you with something he'd like to change from his class? Essentially, he's inventing something. How would you know if it's usable? So that's actually a really good question. So there is something about the core classes that you want to change. How would you approach that then, Matt?
So I mean, the first thing I would do is like, can you just reskin it? Like if someone's wanting to do something else with the class, like I don't know, let's take an example and say, okay, the fighter, one of the fighters like bread and butter things is action surge. It allows them to take another action on a turn. Really useful, really powerful, and it scales with their class. At a certain level, I think it's like 17, they can do action surge twice a day. So effectively
that's right, yeah.
You can use it twice a day. So that's really cool. Okay, and the guy is like, I want to play a fighter, but I want like a barbarian rage ability instead, because I want to be a fighter. I don't want to be a barbarian, but I want to like have this like adrenaline sort of thing happen. You go, okay, just reskin action surge. Just say that action surge is you hulking out and getting powerful and like doing a bunch of stuff on your turn or whatever. And if that doesn't work, if you're not able to reskin it, then I would just again say, okay, well, what function does this serve? Is it not already served by something else? And if not, then let's look at a way to do it. And, maybe it's something that you can pull from another class. Maybe it's something that you can work into the archetype that they've chosen, a feat, something like that. I would always lean on the less work you can do, the better, I guess, is the way to go about it.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I'd say. Go for the reskin and try and keep it as slick as possible. Absolutely.
Yes.
I see there's another question here from T the writer. Hey T. So question: how does Rob? Oh dear. How does Rob wrangle all these big D&D YouTubers anyway? I wish I had the power to make. I'm just really, I just don't leave people alone. I just hound people until they give in. Essentially, T. That's what I do. And you should know. You should know, T. So. You should watch out for that. Let's see. Just trying to see if there's any other questions. Come on, guys.
Everyone's just having too good of a time in the chat, man.
Yeah, just having a field day. Just having a chat about what is your favorite color? That's a question, I guess. I asked for questions.
Oh, what's my favorite color? That was a question?
Well, that is in there, but if you want to give an answer to that, by all means.
I go back and forth. I like green and purple are probably my two favorite colors.
Those are good colors. Also good colors for lightsabers as well.
Yes, very good colors for lightsabers. That is the truth.
That is absolutely the truth. Okay, for a question from BJ Hall. How would you guys approach creating a drunken masterclass? How should I treat the drunkenness versus the buffs it would grant?
I would honestly, I would treat it like a barbarian. Like you know, obviously, if you're creating some sort of like drunken master, the inclination is to go with monk. But I would either just take monk and reskin it and just say like, oh, I only fight really well when I'm drunk, or take a barbarian if you want something mechanical and just do an unarmed barbarian who, when they rage, they're like drinking from their big, you know, thing of sake at their side or whatever, you know, to like take a big swig and they go into a rage and start punching everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the drunken master as well, like I mean, you could just add like a little bit of flavor into it and say,
Totally.
yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, they're drunk. I think there are even mechanics in there for certain negatives coming to place for being drunk, like maybe intelligence drops and things like that. So you could add that into there as well if you wanted to make it a bit more gritty and a bit harsher.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Tommy Dude, I was talking to Stu the other day. 2 questions, Rob. Now you found the Burning Plague module, will you ever run it? Just to explain, I did a crossover with T the Writer, and I was talking about my first ever D&D game, my first ever one, and I'd always wondered what the module was that my scary ass teacher ran for us, and it turns out that Tommy Dude was watching this video and said, I recognize the story that you're telling me, and told me it was this module called the Burning Plague. So in answer to your question, Tommy Dude, I'm probably going to be running like a retrospective video at some point where I actually go through that module and actually talk about its merits and stuff. I might run it one day, I don't know. But the main question is, secondly, if you were to convert an old class from previous editions, which one would you do? I will go to Matt first, unless you'd like to think about it.
Oh, man. A Shadow Dancer.
Damn it.
I love... Oh my god, I loved Shadow Dancer so much in 3rd edition. I had so much fun with that class. And that's a good example of, okay, here's a good example of totally reskinning something and making it totally different. So the lore behind a Shadow Dancer is they're able to literally cloak themselves in shadow, right? They're like umbramancers. They can control darkness and they can like phase into the shadow plane to disappear completely. But I flavored it. I was playing an orc Shadow Dancer, and I flavored it that he was a really, really skilled like gymnast and acrobatic person. And whenever he was doing that, like hide in plain sight, he was basically like leaping up into the rafters or like doing like the like up on the ceiling, like between 2 corners, like in the shadow sort of thing. So he never actually phased into the shadow plane, but he was always just like pole vaulting and like grapple hooking everywhere and like just disappearing from sight and then dropping down on top of people. And that's like, I changed nothing about the mechanics, but that character was not a Shadow Dancer.
But again, it's all about reskinning, man. It's about reflavoring that. So that's a fantastic example. To answer that question, I don't know. I quite liked there was a class called the Duskblade, which came along, which is kind of like the what's it called in the fighter archetypes, Mystic.
The Eldritch Knight.
Eldritch Knight, that's it. It's kind of like that. But that one got crazy later on because the spells in 3.5 were nuts anyway. But you could start channeling disintegrate through your sword and stuff. So you'd be doing your weapon damage of a fighter and the spell damage of a powerful sorcerer. It was just nuts. So I would look at that maybe, but I can see that's also covered by the Eldritch Knight. So
there's also I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide there's an elven like spell sword class option. Hang on, I'm gonna look it up.
I think I know what you mean.
I remember reading about that, but I haven't looked into it. Go ahead and continue. I'm gonna look it
No,
up.
that's fine. I'm just going to look at some other questions quickly. Okay, I have another question, but I don't want to go for it until, because I'm curious too. Everyone, hold your breath.
I can't find it, man. Someone in the chat's gonna tell me. I have the book too. It's downstairs on my shelf, but I can't remember.
That's all right, man. Well,
Blade
if anyone in the chat knows what that is, whack it in there, and you'll get like 10 XP. It'll be great.
I think it's called Blade Singer.
That does ring a bell.
Blade Singer. It's a new arcane tradition.
Ooh, okay.
Anything spell sorty, I'm a huge fan of. I love Eldritch Knights, and whenever I play an Elder Scrolls game, I'm always like a spell sword sort of character. So
yes, I do. I like mixing up the illusion and the blade, so you can turn it into the wall. And, man, awesome. Love it. Yeah. So I can see Marquis is getting annoyed because I think he's reposted this question like 3 times in a row, and I kept missing.
Poor guy.
No, it's my fault. It's my fault. So he says, do you think, Matt, after the Mystic, that Core 5e would need another class?
I don't think 5e needs any more classes. I think that I think more class options just dilutes the game. I think that if you're running 5th edition, like the classes in the player's handbook are really all you need. And I get so tired of the unearthed arcanas that's like new archetypes for this class and new archetypes for this class and a new class for here. And it's like any character I could ever want to make, I can make work with the classes in the player's handbook. Like I can't think of a single character I'd be like, man, I really want to make this character, but it's too bad there's no rules for that. Unless you wanted to be like a mecha pilot or something. Like okay, there's no way to make a mecha pilot in 5th edition. But any sort of fantasy character that I want to make, even if I wanted to do like an artificer character or like a blind archer or anything like that, like I can achieve those things through like picking a class and reskinning the things that don't match the concept that I have. And there's no reason to have to like switch stuff around or have, books and books and books of different options. And this is funny that I'm saying this because we're in a hangout about making your own classes. And I'm saying, don't make your own classes. Don't do it. And I am like a semi-professional game designer saying, don't buy books with other classes in them. Don't do it. It's so stupid. But for like a homebrew situation, it's like you will never need anything beyond just the player's handbook.
No, I completely agree. The merit that I see in that is that to get kind of inspiration about perhaps a particular conceit that you want your character to have, a concept. Like mechanically, I completely agree with you. You don't need anything else. Like anything else, I think is just dressing. But you're right. Yeah. I think too much complicated mechanics, it can absolutely dilate the already solid formula. So I agree.
Yeah.
Mike Bergman says, question, I've been struggling reskinning a monk. So we're talking about reskinning now. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling reskinning a monk to a knife thrower. Like using the flurry of blows, but arranged with knives. Sounds awesome. Any ideas or tips?
So specifically using flurry of blows, I don't know if flurry of blows works with ranged weapons, but I'll tell you how I would reskin it to make it work with throwing daggers. Is I'm of a mind that attack roll on your turn, a single attack. Like it's not like people are standing around for 6 seconds going like this and then going huh! And then waiting another 6 seconds and then going huh! Like your single attack roll on your turn is an abstract representation of a flurry of combat. You're parrying, you're dodging, you're flanking along one side, you're ducking under their legs and coming up on the other side of them. You're jab left, jab right. That roll represents all of that. And it's like, if you're successful, you've wounded them, tired them out, otherwise reduce their hit points, whatever. So if you're looking to play a monk who's like really good at, like, I'm picturing like he wants to play a monk that like comes up with their fist and has a throwing dagger in between each finger and throws all of them. Dude, just a single attack roll. It'll do as much damage as a single dagger. Just describe it as you're throwing 4 little darts or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's spot on, and it's a really cool idea. Like,
yeah, for
like
sure.
you said, I'm imagining, when you see in Dark Knight Returns when Batman has like a batarang in between each finger and then launches them. That's what I'm imagining.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm picturing too. Yeah.
So Carlo Galbiati says, what are your thoughts on people changing spells to do essentially the same thing but slightly different? Like how we saw Dice from the Convokers, make an ice vitriolic sphere.
Oh yeah, I love that kind of stuff. Like, it's very rarely going to matter. Like if you're, I guess it could matter if you're coming up against a creature that's specific, that's like weak to a certain type of damage or whatever. But most of the time, like reskinning spells is one of my favorite things to do. In Provoker's Bleak Wrath, we have a druid in the party. Tim from Tabletop Terrors is playing a druid, and he can shapeshift. He can turn into animals, but he's flavoring it as not turning into an animal, but rather using bark and leaves and roots and stuff to create like armor of the animal around him, and then imbuing himself with the abilities of that animal. Mechanically, that's not what shape change does, but it's really cool, and it doesn't mechanically change anything that he's doing that. It works the same way,
Absolutely. Basically, Tim has made the druid version of Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's just nuts.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so awesome. I love it.
So yeah, I think, and to just go on the thread about, it might be a little different if you're going against something, say, that would be weak for ice. Ice damage, for example. But I'm guessing with that, you would commit to that spell doing solely that type of energy damage. So sure, you might do well against one creature, but it's if you reskin a spell, it should stick that way, maybe, unless it's something mechanically that allows you to change.
Or like if for whatever reason they came up against a creature that was weak against ice or whatever, it's like you would just like, no one's gonna know that you're not doubling the damage for that particular spell or whatever. It's like no one knows that behind the screen you're basically like, well, that's not actually ice, so I'm not going to count it as double damage, or whatever. Like, effectively, it doesn't matter. No one's going to know.
Absolutely, yeah. Just trying to find another question.
Yeah, I see some popping up here.
Oh yeah, if you see one, go ahead.
I just saw one in there. Point of Inspiration asks, what is your favorite class, and then what is your least favorite and why? Why don't you answer this one first, Rob?
Okay, my least... No, it's fine. My least favorite class, well, as we've been saying, like, in terms of the core classes, I think they are all there and they all perform a specific duty. I think, I don't know, like, I've never been too enamored with, be careful what I say here. I've never been too enamored with the Ranger.
Okay, yeah.
But that isn't because of the concept, it's because of what they get mechanically. Like, I think it's fine, but I don't know. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite, but it's one that I'd be least like to play. That or maybe a Bard. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Bards are quite fun.
Rangers are one of those classes that it takes them like 2 or 3 levels until they get a really cool thing. You know what I mean? Like, the basic like beginning stuff that a Ranger gets is it's useful, but it's not very like thematically cool, I guess. So I agree with that.
Yeah, and I'd say favorite. It's a toss-up either between the Sorcerer, because I'm nostalgic about a Sorcerer that I played a long time ago, or Rogue Assassin, just because they're really cool. Yeah. How about you, man?
So least favorite.
Yeah.
Least favorite. I don't really have a class that I dislike, but I would say that the one that I'm like least likely to play or have played the least is Monk. I like monks. I think they're really cool, but I have played them probably fewer times than any other class. The times that I've played them, I've enjoyed them. They have really cool stuff, and I love like using the key points to do extra attacks and like boost your damage and stuff like that. It's cool. But yeah, definitely like if I'm rolling up a character, I'm not like, ooh, I want to play a monk. Like I never think that. Having said that, Nate's monk, his halfling monk in Provokers right now is like sort of changing my mind on that, because he's like just Jason Bourne kicking everybody's ass. Like I think he's down more people in that game than any other character. But and then for favorite, I go back and forth between rogue and cleric for my favorite class. I love the rogue. I love the cleric. The rogue is the one that I've probably played the most. I just like being able to sneak. I like being strategic with hiding and coming out of a stealth and things like that. I like all the skills they get. I like feeling useful with traps and locks and things like that. But for 5th edition, my favorite class is the warlock. I absolutely adore the warlock because they can wear armor, they can use weapons, they get awesome invocation stuff that no other caster class gets, and they have just enough spells to keep me satisfied, but not so many that I get overwhelmed like when I'm playing a wizard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like the warlock as well. I think with the monk, it was interesting because the monk first appeared like mid-70s where kung fu movies were really popular. So all of a sudden the monk appears in D&D and it's sort of been there
like,
since.
Wait,
what? But I think you're right. 5th edition, they really come into their own, and I think Nate's character is a really good example of how to do it well. And also with the rogue, I just like the idea of someone using their own skill and their own basically their own skill in a world filled with people that have superpowers, you know?
Exactly. Like, oh, totally. Yeah. Well, and I mean, on that same note, I love the like half caster archetypes that you get in 5th edition, where you can be a fighter and go Eldritch Knight, or you can be a rogue and go Arcane Trickster. Like I'm in the Dragon Grin campaign, my character Ephraim, we are almost to level 3, and I'm so excited to go Arcane Trickster. Like I've never been more excited about anything in my life, because I took the feat at 1st level. It's called like Magic Initiate, I think it's called, and you get like a couple cantrips and 1 1st level spell. So I've already got a little bit of casting, but I'm just so excited to like do more casting as a rogue, because I'm just like, I'm a rogue. Darkness, like I'm stealth now, sneak attack, like just like combining the blades and the stealth and the magic is just like every character I've ever played in a video game ever. Like I'm so excited for that.
Dude, that's amazing, and you're definitely selling me on being an Arcane Trickster next, because I've not been one yet. I usually go for Assassin, but I might try Arcane Trickster.
Yeah, Assassin is good. I mean, if you're wanting to just be a kick-ass rogue, then Assassin is the way to go. But the more that I play D&D, and the more, like, the older I get, the more I love utility classes that can just do a bunch of cool things in different situations. Like Arcane Trickster, Eldritch Knight, like some of those archetypes are just so useful in so many different situations. Definitely.
That question got us talking. My goodness me. Just geeking out on that, man. And by the way, for those watching, you can obviously watch Matt and the rest of the Dragon Grin campaign bunch tomorrow, 8:30 EDT, is it?
Yes, 8:30 Eastern, I think, is what it is. Yeah.
I
should probably make sure. I'm playing that game.
Well, it came up, so I thought we better plug it because it's a great game.
Yeah, for sure. No, appreciate that.
So BJ Hall says, how would you guys, Matt and Rob, approach creating a useful illusionist? I feel the illusion class is really powerful, but I want to craft spells. How would I be able to craft spells that fit better? I have an answer for this, but I want to hear what you say first.
I'll actually defer to you on this because I got to think about it.
Okay, I'll defer it back to you. No, I'm kidding.
You son of a...
Playing tennis here, man. So if you go, BJ, I don't know if you do or not. I think you might have checked out one or two. The Lorekeepers, the campaign I run. Lorekeepers, my man, plays an exceptional illusionist, a drow illusionist called Iterating, who intentionally has not taken any attack aggressive spells. He is just about deception. He is just about confusing the enemy. And he's great. Like he pulls as much weight in a fight as anyone else because he is all about diverting the enemy's attention. I won't spoil the latest session, but they went up against an incredibly powerful beast with a lot of attacks. And on more than one occasion, it was befuddled and confused and attacked places where the players weren't. So really think about putting on a show as an illusionist. Really think about the subterfuge of it all. Basically, sleight of hand with magic.
So as much chaos as possible.
Absolutely, and like chuck a few grease spells in there as well because Lucas loves doing that as well. Making people fall on their ass at the end of the day. I know it's not technically an illusion spell, but it
helps.
Have a few support spells in there as well, just in case they see through your deceptions.
I have to say that Lorekeepers is probably every game I've played with him or had him in where he's playing a caster, I'm constantly impressed by his creativity with spells. Within the bounds of the rules of that spell. Like Lorekeepers has never done anything that's like, oh, I don't know if it will allow for that. Like he always just like thinks of really awesome uses for spells. I remember the first game I played in with Lorekeepers, it was Andrew Knapp, SR2 Joker. He was running this amazing campaign, the Githyanki campaign. It's a fairly infamous campaign in the one-shot group community. But I got to play in one of those sessions, and in the session, we're on a boat, and we're getting, like, attacked from above. Oh, man, I can't remember what was going on, but we were, like, getting attacked from above. I had never played with Lorekeepers before. I'd never met Lorekeepers before, and so I was like, who is this guy? Like, like he comes in the hangout, he's blue and he's just very like jovial and charismatic. And I'm just like, this guy is just cracking me up. And then he's at the helm of this ship. We're getting attacked and he casts, what's that spell where you can create a hut? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. It's like something's magic. Yeah. Temporary hut.
He creates the hut around the wheel of the ship, and he's just in the hut steering the ship, and he goes, if anyone wants to avoid these arrows, just come hang out in the hut with me. And I'm like, oh my god. It's just so smart. It was one of the most creative uses of a spell I'd ever seen, and he just instantly won me over. I was like, this dude is awesome.
He is a great, Lorekeepers will school anyone on how to creatively use magic. The dude is just out of this world in more ways than one, but like he's very good at doing that, especially.
Yes, for sure.
So yeah, BJ, go watch Lorekeepers. Absorb the power that is Lorekeepers, our resident blue angel.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my god, like we could do nothing better than him.
Exactly. He's the peak, man.
Yeah. Mecha Tommy Dude has said mecha pilot to what you said earlier. Fighter archetype.
Yeah, I suppose that could work. Yeah, for sure. We might see, ship combat's going to be a thing in Harbinger, so we might see some archetypes in Harbinger that are focused around like flying a ship and stuff, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just trying to find some more questions relevant to classes.
I saw one and I lost it.
That's annoying. If you are going to whack any more, I mean, we won't be too much longer, but if you do have any last minute questions you want to whack in there, in caps, put question before you write out your question.
That's great. Smart. That's really smart.
That would be helpful. Okay. So Tommy Dude has actually put another one in. Question, and here's an interesting thought. What class do you think is the most iconic to D&D? The one that represents all the highs and lows, if any?
Probably wizard or rogue for me.
I was gonna say wizard. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry. One word answer. Really. It has to be because that's what I instantly think of anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Any last minute questions before you wrap up?
Looks like Marquise had one. He said, how do you guys feel about class archetypes made for different settings? I think that's smart. I think that if you're wanting to make a setting, but you don't necessarily want just the regular like classes, presenting some different options that are a little bit more thematic and like tied to the setting, I think is really smart. And doing it with archetypes, I think is the best way to do it, because you're not creating an entire class. You're creating the archetypes get 3 or 4 things total, I think, for each class. So creating new archetypes is a really smart way to do it.
Absolutely. Oh, this is a good one. At the very bottom, Nationalist says, question for the Harbinger stuff. What is the most difficult thing to work? What has been the most difficult thing to work through so far?
The magic system by 1,000% is the hardest thing.
I'm just going to say, whilst I've got you here, man, like I watched the playtest. I mentioned this to you when I was talking to you about this, and my God, it inspired. We're talking about sort of taking from the core mechanics, the wild magic, but for the Astrofade. Oh my God, just inspired. Absolutely.
Yeah,
inspired.
It's figuring out how to make magic powerful but not necessarily exploitable is really difficult. And we're not just creating spells, we're creating spells that have boosts, these things that you can accrue additional Astra in order to power up the spell. So there's a spell in Harbinger called Energy Tendril. It's this spell where you lash out with energy and you can pull a creature 15 feet. And it requires a save, but if you're doing it to one of your allies, like if one of your allies is in trouble, you can literally pull them 15 feet towards you. The boosts are you can move the creature 30 feet instead of 15 feet. So let's say you're 30 feet away from a creature and you want to cast this spell that's a bonus action and pull them towards you and stab them. You can do that by using that boost. There's another one that says the creature is now grappled. So you lash out, pull them 15 feet, and now you have them restrained. You have them grappled. And the third boost is you could do it to 2 creatures. So all of a sudden, this spell that's like, you move someone 15 feet. Now you're like, I'm going to use all 3 boosts. I'm going to get 2 of them. I'm going to pull them 30 feet, and they're now grappled. Like, oh my God, that spell just it's like a level 5 spell now all of a sudden. And so having low-level characters have access to incredibly powerful magic, there's so many checks and balances that have to happen to make sure that there's risks, but that the rewards are worth the risks. And so balancing that out is like a constant, that's going to be the biggest hurdle, I think, in the playtest is that hurdle.
Yeah, no, I think I see what you mean. But I just love the whole idea of the risk of using it. Like, for one, obviously that makes it fun playing the game, but also that is just opened up a whole new sort of pathway of story. Like, there can be so many infinite stories of Astra gone wrong. It's just
yeah, exactly. I think it's really cool. It's something that I really enjoyed working on, even though it was the most difficult thing, but it's also been really rewarding. And I think that Tim actually helped me sort of finesse the way that the negative effects work when you go over your Astrofade limit. And we've basically created tiers of things that get worse the higher you get, so that if you go 1 over your Astrofade, it's not possible that you're just going to die outright anymore, which I think is important. We want people to go over their Astrofade. We want to encourage them to accrue these negative effects. And so I think we balance that by having a few effects on the table that are a little bit more positive or a little bit more neutral or a little bit give and take. Like your Astrofade reduces, but you take some damage, or, you look at the Astrofade tables and you say, well, I can go 5 over my Astrofade before there's real chance of me dying. So I'm going to do that, So we want that danger to be real, but not so real that the people don't want to go, beyond their astrophyte. We want people to do that. So.
Oh man. And I look forward to doing it because it looks so it
Yeah.
looks so much fun, just going nuts.
It was fun, man. It was fun. As soon as in the playtest, as soon as Barker dropped the particle wall and everyone took cover behind it, I was like, oh, this is real. We're actually playing Harbinger right now. This is really cool.
Just insane. Just so fun. So awesome. Just great stuff. So a question from we're just going to go through the last couple of questions now. Another one from BJ Hall, a friend of mine, and I guess this is kind of similar to making things like Harbinger. A friend of mine wants to do a D&D modern campaign. How would you treat the base classes in a modern setting? Like, how would you guys reskin them to a modern setting without feeling classic? So I guess, that's an interesting one.
Yeah. I would think about the setting. If it's going to be like a modern setting that's like the world we live in today, obviously there aren't people walking around with swords and stuff. So you'd have to think about, so we see, like, what sort of flavor do I want it to have? Do I want people to have guns and swords? Do I want them to be able to wear armor? Is there magic? Things like that. Like a rogue in D&D is not that much different from somebody who's doing espionage nowadays. Like they can pick locks and disable traps and, stay hidden and things like that. And like a fighter's not that much different either. They're good at like moving in armor with equipment on. They're good at using weapons. They can take a little bit more punishment, things like that. So mostly thinking about the setting that you're playing in and like, does everyone have a gun? Does everyone have a weapon of some kind? Is everyone wearing armor? Like, are you doing like a, like D20 modern where they're like, in a helicopter, jumping out of a helicopter, doing like missions and things like that. Probably they'd have like Kevlar, medium light armor, guns, things like that, maybe some knives, and then trying to decide if you want magic or not. Because that's the one thing that modern setting is like, okay, does magic still exist? And if it does it work the same way? Or do you want to look into using something like psionics where there's magic, but it's like psychic. And so you have like, soldiers and then like psychic people, like you do like a Metal Gear Solid sort of thing with it.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. And just to say to BJ as well, like I've never really put it into action, but I've always wanted to run something using a D20 system, probably 5th edition it would be in this case, where you play just standard people that don't have access to guns and things like that. So if you do come across someone with a gun, then it's like, oh my god.
Like in real life. In real life, if you come across someone, you're like, oh, whoa.
Oh my god, absolutely. There are stats for guns in the in 5th, and I think they're quite strong. So would be a threat.
Yep.
So just check out.
Yeah, the guns as written in the Dungeon Master's Guide are incredibly powerful. So it's like you gotta add those in with a very careful hand. They're very powerful.
Absolutely, and I don't know if there's anything online for them to look at for this, but I know, Matt, you have a setting, don't you, that is gunpowder heavy, but in a fantasy world. So if it was more about that.
Yeah, I have it's just something I'm tinkering with a little bit. That's like it's very like Warhammer Fantasy, where there's a human empire that has gunpowder, and that's allowed them to like come up against the more magical races and things like that. But the thing that I found with running games in that setting is like cover is so important, because that +2 that you get from half cover is like the difference between you getting shot with a D12 rifle bullet and you not getting shot with a D12 rifle bullet. So when it comes down to it, guns are no more powerful than a spell. It's just that they're spells that everyone can hold and use.
Yes, anyone can do it.
Yep.
Anyone can point and squeeze. So we'll treat this as the last question. Tommy Dude once again says, question, one last one. What do you think the line is between making an archetype and writing thematic feats?
That is a good question. I think the line for me is, with an archetype, do you want it to be a subclass? Do you want it to be a type of fighter? So like for you, Rob, like you're wanting to have something tangible and mechanical for the Lorekeepers to set them apart from, your everyday adventurer. So it's like, you wouldn't necessarily create an archetype because there are different classes within the ranks of the Lorekeepers. You know, there's fighters and there's bards and there's wizards or whatever. And so you wouldn't necessarily create an archetype because you want it to be different classes. And so you would more look at something like a faction class or faction feats that only members of the faction have access to. So thinking about, do I want this archetype? Do I want it to be a subclass? Do I want it to be another thing that you can do if you're a fighter or a paladin or whatever? And if not, maybe I want it to be a feat or an item that only they can use or whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is great because I've always said this about you, Matt. You're very cyclical in the way you answer. You just brought us back right to the beginning, which is just perfect. He does it every time.
I don't do it by design. Don't mistake that for me being a good orator.
You just ramble in circles. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. It's me panicking at the end of a ramble and going, oh shoot, what was I talking about at first? Okay, bring it back around there. Now it seems like I know what I'm talking about.
I do that all the time. The only thing I will say to add to those points is, and as Matt has clearly demonstrated throughout this, is that when you're taking an archetype that from a class or just an entire class, it's committing to a sort of you know, putting the work into basically whacking all the mechanics into that. With the feats, I think it's just a really nice way of setting it apart without robbing the core classes of what makes those special. And that is what I've learned from this stream today. So yeah, I think that about does it, man. So thank you so much. This has been really fun, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been it is really fun to just sit and hang out and talk with you, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And thanks to you, I now have a direction that I'm gonna go in terms of the Lorekeepers and actually putting some stuff down as to what separates them from the average Joe. Thank you once again, Matt. This has been absolutely amazing. Always love to get more insight from your wonderful brain, and thank you ever so much for you guys watching. If you like this video, if you're watching after the fact, give it a like. If you'd like to see more like it, then give me a subscribe or not. We are all friends here, or are we? Thanks for watching, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard. Say toodles.
Toodles.
You said it. Toodles. Bye.